Have you studied other social systems at all?
Not really.
Okay.
I've just been, trying to...
The failure of science in this phase of our time is that science in its universities and high school level has avoided the most important thing, and that's social awareness. Scientists themselves are extremely stupid in that area, most of them. You cannot be a scientist unless you look into the nature of values, how humans arrive at their values, how cultures freeze their societies, they build a wall around their societies and try to keep you from knowing about other societies. It's like the Democrats describe the Republicans, and the Republicans describe the Democrats. You think they're monsters if you got a description from each one. Fortunately, our newspapers, in some instances, cover a little more of the Republican point of view, a little more of the Democratic point of view. But in the schools of the future, they would invite a communist from a leading communist country, a technician, and he will get up and tell you how communism works there. Then invite a Swede from the middle way across between socialism and free enterprise, and they will tell you how their system works. But you'll never have an American get up and tell you what the matter is with any system without a representative of that system. In other words, if you're interested in the theory of relativity and the church denounces it, you must then permit, this is going to sound strange to you, 10 hours for the relativistic scientists on TV and 20 minutes for the church, because they've had thousands of hours to give their point of view. See, the concept of debate is crude and vulgar because it gives you equal time. If you're dealing with a new idea and people already have a set of motherhood, mother knows best, whatever the hell the values are of the culture, you don't have time, in equal time, to modify values of people. So you need more time. They do it in running, handicap. You give them a 50-foot start. If you got a small sailboat and it isn't in the same class, they alter conditions. So you get Christ on the air every Sunday, and lots of it. And an atheist, maybe, 4 times a year, in limited time with pressure from everybody. So a democratic society will have one page on why I believe in the free enterprise system. The next full page is a free enterprise system isn't worth a shit. And the third page is both systems think, free enterprise and communism. You have nothing but viewpoints. Do you understand? Okay. You don't have that yet, so you don't have a democracy. All you have is a word. You don't have freedom. They keep talking about it all the time. If you wanted to build that house in Coral Gables, they'll never let you do it. The zoning board and they want it to look more like a conventional house. They don't talk about freedom. It's bullshit. The fact is that so many people have been conditioned to what they call a normal point of view, which is insane, that they all seem to go along with the system. They've never heard of anything outside of the system. So your system is utterly corrupt. And in order for you and I to talk, you should know a little bit about the fundamental differences between this point of view and the system's point of view, existing system. In the days of, as you know, in the days of Galileo, it was very hard to talk of new ideas. The first fellow that invented eyeglasses was put in jail in Italy because they felt if God wanted you to see well, you wouldn't need an eyeglasses. You understand what I mean? And you're interfering with God's domain. And some people say, well, we've gone too far in technology. I think we ought to get back to a little more natural living. So I say, well, take your clothes off. Get out of your house. Turn off your air conditioning. Get rid of your fan, your radio, your record players. What the hell is natural living? Arsenic is natural. There are many pollution and hurricanes is not a natural pollution. You understand? They don't know what they're talking about. And therefore, in your schools, they treat science as different branches. You're a chemist or a botanist or a physiologist, and there's no such thing as different branches of science. Science is a method, a way of thinking. And therefore, the scientist who's only interested in astronomy is some sort of a damn fool. He would have to be interested in chemistry, life systems, and many other forms, many other branches of. So science is a way of thinking. And possibly an adequate definition is the science as the methodology of determining the next most probable. Scientists are concerned with prediction, not metaphysical prediction. Prediction of trend. In other words, if you find this here, I'll use this old analogy of Niagara Falls. What scientists do And the difference between scientists and metaphysicians is they photograph the falls at a certain time, then they photograph it 30 years later and find that it's taken this turn. Some of the rocks fall down here, the boulders. Then they do a 60-year projection under similar conditions, and they extrapolate what the falls will look like 1,000 years from now, 200 years from now. But it's not sitting around saying, you think we ought to do this or that. It's based upon extrapolation. That's what the young lady didn't understand. It was down last week. She said, well, my opinion is as good as yours. See, we're brought up, that is, though some people exposed to science in the early days were brought up that no human should have a right to their own opinion. See, whereas the way you're brought up is that everyone should have a right to their own opinion. Isn't that right?
Right.
That's the way you're brought up. And we believe that everyone should have access to the facts. Because some people, if you walk over to some people and you say, do you think man will ever get to the moon? What's your opinion? He says, not in 1,000 years. That's dangerous. First say, are you into astrophysics? Propulsion technology? No. You study the space science? No. Well, don't bother asking the question. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Now, if people have access to information and never an opinion, the way you talk about it is when he says he can shrink stereo equipment down to 2 microns. You say, well, I don't know what type of circuitry you use. You can do that. I'm not familiar with the art of miniaturization. You can say that. But what? That size? Not in 1,000 years. That's an opinion. And it's flowing all over the place. People have opinions about everything. What we want to do is smash the concept that everyone should have a right to their own opinion. The dangers of it, as I pointed out many times before, if a young girl lived across the street and 20 guys came out of her place, in one day, people have opinions about that. She could be an art instructor, a language instructor, do you know what I mean? Or a prostitute, or anything else. When you give somebody your opinion about something, you're living dangerously. So from our point of view, I want you to understand that right away, if you can accept that. Another thing that you've got to accept is, if you can accept this, the notion that you're brought up is that something about communication is a very important branch of science, that humans have to communicate with each other. And from this point of view, humans cannot communicate with each other. Now let me tell you what that means. Instead of getting angry, you listen and then you take it from there. We say that humans do not try to communicate. Never. They never try to communicate. But they do something, and here's what they do. So we go back in time thousands of years ago, maybe millions of years ago, possibly when the first primitive person were eating something and somebody came over to try to take it away from him while he was eating. He may have pushed them away. And later he went like that and the guy stood away, didn't come near him. Then he went like that. Then he went like that. Then he said, no. And this was to control the behavior of the other person. When I tell somebody to do something, they don't do it. When I hold a gun there, they do it. Gun is a behavioral control mechanism. It doesn't always work, but it has a high probability of working. When you tell one nation not to bother another nation, you aim sufficient equipment at their land and say, now let me tell you what we want of you. This is a control device. The gun was also called the equalizer. In the early days, a short man, big husky man, when they went to battle, the big guy threw the little guy across the field. The little guy invented the bow and arrow. You understand what I mean? Oh, with a lot of other little guys over a long period of time. And it was a bow and arrow that was a sort of an equalizer. The gun became a real equalizer. I don't care how tall you are. If I have the same range you have and similar training, then it brings us closer to equal combat. I'm not recommending guns or anything. I'm just trying to show you what things are about. People talk to each other because they want something. There's no such thing as communication. They want something. So when I say to you, what time is it? You do something like this if you've got a watch. People always try to control the behavior of other people. Now, example, when I say to a girl, your hair, your eyes, your ears, I'm attempting something. Is that right? When I dim down the lights in my apartment and play some classical music, I'm attempting something. I don't do it with you. You understand? Okay. Well, the point is, when people make sounds at each other, they are not communicating. They're trying to control the behavior of others. That's what the church is all about. The old men that ruled the lands in the past couldn't control people, so they made a set of laws. thou shalt not steal, and they were the only ones that have anything worth stealing, the guys that owned everything. So they gave them fear of God and fear of hell and all sort of thing in an attempt to control people. And if people didn't behave, the priest said you'd be burnt eternally in hell, tortured and all that. And that worked up to a point, okay? Sometimes the guy says to a girl, will you marry me? And he gets a negative response. So he opens a box with a pearl necklace. And she says, you shouldn't have. So if he put it back in his pocket then, it would bring on another response. So what happens is, a call, we get along fairly well, but he never buys me a ring, because it has no effect. Fine. So men and women have been brought up to attempt to control one another's behavior. See? Now, when there's what they call a communication breakdown, you lose control. When I tell you to, don't dump your ashes on the floor, if I say that to you, and you still continue to, I raise my voice. God damn it! That's an attempt to control you. If you don't do it, then I form a fist. That's what a battleship is. A battleship is a method for attempting to maintain control and behavior of other nations. They call it a defense system. Nothing to do with defense. Okay? Now, if you can agree with cats, for example, I had a lot of animals around at one time, and I made a record of a refrigerator door opening, and the cat would run into the kitchen. Understand? That's behavioral control. And I always played this record. The cat would run in the kitchen, the refrigerator was never open. See? The cat kept coming back, very confused like. So if you wish to control the behavior of animals, you have to find out what moves animals. And if you wish to control roaches, if you don't want them in your house, you don't spray poisons. You make a study of scents, sound devices that keep roaches out of the area. You go on it as a study. And if you want children to behave well and intelligently, you raise them in an environment that generates the kind of behavior you want. Now, we also do not believe that humans have free will. I know you didn't know that. That all their decisions are forced. The Great Plains Indians wear feathered hats. Not because they're Indians, because that's all they see in the environment. Is that all right? I believe if you were raised by the Indians, you would wear feathers. Do you buy that, or you're not sure?
Not sure.
I suppose you never saw anything else but Indians. You never read any books or anything.
And I probably dress like this.
Right. And if you're brought up in Italy, you speak with an Italian accent. Do you buy that, or you're not sure?
I probably speak it down.
Okay. So, what is you? What is this individuality?
Something that's shaped by the environment.
Okay, so there's no such thing. What happens, what they call a person, an individual, it means a human being that had somewhat of a different exposure than the average person. If you lived with an aeronautical engineer for 20 years, and a chemist for 10 years, and a musician for 15 years, and you liked them, your views would be somewhat central to the system, depending on your hearing and how they treated you. Is that all right? Okay. What I'm saying is that environment shapes behavior. Environment shapes manners. Environment shapes sexual patterns. They're not your own. When you're very young, somebody says, you got a pecker, you know what you're doing? You stick it in a female. Oh, you're full of shit. You don't believe it right away. So they tell you what to do with it, and pretty soon you're oriented that way, or else they tell you you have to screw a guy up the ass, or whatever. Whoever the hell gets to you, or whatever environment influences you. If you bring up girls with boys only, then they behave like a boy. If you bring up a guy with a dominant mother that's a pain in the ass and father is a nice guy, he may dislike women if the association's hard enough. But there's no such thing as a natural born. They use words like faggot, homosexual, trisexual, bisexual. Trisexual tries anything. Okay? Trisexual would be more in the lines of science. I happen to be conditioned normal. I happen to go for women. That doesn't make it right. That's the way I was brought up. And because someone else has other preferences, we ridicule them. You know, when are you going to get a haircut, son? You know, I've never heard that shit. Well, in your day, everybody had long hair. When I was a kid, I'd walk down the street and people would yell, Abraham Lincoln. They'd yell, goddamn Castro. In other words, because you live in a sick world, the world is insane, the great majority of people. Now, that doesn't mean that their brain is warped. It means their values are warped by culture. Is that all right?
Okay.
Anything bug you up to now?
No. But I think if I know what you're driving at, you're saying that the reason why I left Wisconsin is I was brought up in an environment that allows me to think that way. because...
That rewarded you for thinking that way.
Well, I think that's wrong because my father is an insurance salesman, my mother is a realtor, and the only science background I ever had was my own reading.
Yeah, but you don't identify with your parents' viewpoint, do you?
No.
So they couldn't reinforce you. Okay?
Well,
All right.
they think I'm like Buck Rogers, that I like,
Yeah, well, you got to understand, your parents are... see, there's contradictions in all our lives because we are brought up to the concept of honoring your father and mother. And we in science say honor any human being worthy of honor, whether they're slanty-eyed or black or short or tall. Do you understand? Honor any human being worthy of honor, any nation. But if you become patriotic, it'd be anti-science. If my school teacher would say, what's the greatest country in the world, I say, in what area? Mining, the arts, optics. Is that all right? Okay. So no country is the greatest country in the world. See, so if you get out of all that shit, including the ego battle, I can run faster than you. If a kid says that to you, you say, that's right. What's your problem? So what? But kids argue about it. Oh, yeah, and they get in, because they pick it up. That's where a baseball game is. A fully grown human being running through the field with a ball in his hand. Isn't it amazing that it attracts that many people? But sports is insane. It's designed to occupy the time of humans who might begin to ask questions. Ball games, football, baseball, basketball, all ball games, bowling was designed, as religion was designed, so that people, when they had a day off, they used to sit around and say, how come the king has 42 rooms, 1,000 wives, and all I've got is a stale loaf of bread? So they arranged battles and scenes for people to go to. Then they had the church on their day off. And then they arranged community singing and dancing to fill in time off. That's what all these dances are about. The rock concerts would take all the young kids and move them across the country, one place to another. It is a nothing thing, dancing. You got to think about it. What is that shit? It's nothing at all. You understand? Now, if a man came from Mars and he saw a lot of people moving around like that, look at that. And he said, what is that? And you say, well, that's dancing. Yes, but what is it? Does it improve the kidney function or anything? No? Well, I don't understand it. Do you understand? It's a nothing thing, like religion is a nothing thing. Okay? Now, society you live in is full of nothing things and nothing words. There are a lot of words that have absolutely no meaning. That's why semantics is very necessary. Semantics deals with the meaning of words as people use them. People use words and they draw different inferences from words than the way you use it. If I say, I would like to see a world in which everyone lived together in peace and worked constructively. The person gets up. You'll never see that happen in 1,000 lifetimes. You would assume, if you were a scientist, that the person had just studied all human systems and found that that cannot be arranged. But it's not true. It's just a worthless opinion. Okay? Now, it's possible for man to do almost anything. And so, before I got into the subject of space colonization, I wanted you to know that the approach was a little different than your habits of thought. So it seems to me that if we want to do any undersea exploration, you're interested in undersea photography up to a point, right? You know you can run by sonar devices, mechanisms under the ocean, crawl along, pick up core samples without putting a person in the equipment. Is that all right? And you know you can put stereo cameras on there, good lighting, and all kinds of underwater sonic transmitters and thermographs, and you don't need a guy in the apparatus. Okay. When you put a unit out in space and you want to purify, or you want to make metals that do not sink to the bottom of the tank, there's no flotation, you want to make pure metals, you want to develop a new metal or chemical technology or electronic technology in space, free of gravity, in a relatively sterile environment, you can do a lot of fantastic work in chemistry, genetics, engineering, materials. Is that right? Okay. So what you do is you build a space station on Earth, the same as the one out there. And you put humans in it, and they manipulate all of the duplicating devices, you know what I mean? And that moves them up there. By putting people out there, off the sea Clark, there's no need to. You see? Now, if you want to go and fly through space and stop there and just get the feeling of it, that's something else. But there's no need for it. There's no need to put a guy in an ICBM, you know what I mean, and launch it at Russia. I don't see any need for aircraft carriers at all. with the new tidal wave generators. They generate a tidal wave of 1,000 feet. What good is an aircraft carrier, a submarine? This is in the old days, meaning 10 years ago, they can produce a 1,000-foot tidal wave with an H-bomb. So what is your fleet for? Apparently, the Bureau of Naval Operations are either comprised of extremely stupid people, there's a lot of contracts in it for people, but it makes no sense to me. Now, I'll tell you something else you didn't know about. About 25 years ago, I don't know how old you are, but we used to have the Ground Observation Corps. Did you ever hear those words? They were good citizens, probably American Legion and others. Used to stand out on a corner with their hats and look for enemy aircraft. They'd stand at the sea. And in those days, they only did 700 miles an hour. You know what I mean? So by the time you spotted an enemy aircraft and went to give the alert, be gone. What the hell's the Ground Observation Corps? And they were selling little shelters you put underground, concrete. And you went in there during a nuclear raid, and the heat...
When you come out, where do you go?
Well, you never come out because the heat from your body, the heat of the bomb, will cause the moisture in your body to blow you to smithereens. I mean, these things are all done by insane people. What I want to say to you again, the Bureau of Naval Operations, the CIA, the FBI are comprised of extremely stupid people. They're generating this time. Their viewpoint is constricted to this time. Therefore, if you turn to a congressman or a politician, you're bound to get a lot of hot air because there isn't any information in their language. So, like I said many times before, we have enough bombs to destroy the earth many times, so the armament system is just good business for a short term.
I understand what you're talking about, but the way I was thinking about space colonies or going into space was, you talk about in the future a brotherhood of the whole world together,
yes,
so that there'd be no wars and be peace. But as I see it today, the only way it's going to happen is if there's some radical change, civil
many
revolution.
radical changes, yeah.
Do you consider it possible that there could be a slow evolution towards it? Because right now there's OTLAG, it's a German corporation that runs out of Zaire. They do a lot of rocket launching, and then the Japanese have contracted one whole space shuttle in 1993.
Yes.
So how about all the world powers or all the countries getting together, designing one, and that would almost tie it together. It would be a world thing, and they see it, they could work together.
Oh, those are good trends. I agree with you.
Okay.
At the present, they are useful trends.
Start close up in space. And then in space, you talk about also your self-sufficient cities, where everything for the city is done around it. All their own food processing, or growing, hydroponically and all that.
Yes.
Well, how about a space con of 10,000 people that proves that it can be done? That one thing that only occupies a couple billion cubic yards.
Well, it can be done. Okay. You don't need the people up there.
But the people don't understand that on Earth right now. They say, oh, it can't be done. It's impossible.
Yeah, but that isn't the technology problem, because technology says, what do you want? You want a nuclear weapon? And they make it. Mm-hmm. What do you want? You want an automated mechanism that photographs Venus or Saturn? We'll make it. If you give them the money to do it, they'll get it. Now, whether or not there ought to be a man on Mars or the moon, that's another question. The use value of it is the question. Well, what use is it?
Okay, well, the use I see is that it would, draw public opinion towards that.
You think then the world might be operated a great deal by public opinion. You've got to remember that most of your newspapers are controlled. Now, the President of the United States really doesn't make any decisions. Neither does the CIA. A lot of people don't know this. They think, oh, the CIA does this or that. There's a group, and that is, we call them the unholy three. The banks, mass heavy industry, the church. There's a group that really controls the United States. They make the policies. They determine what ought to be done to serve their established order of things. They want to keep things this way. In order to keep things this way, you get up and you tell children, you say to them, what's the greatest country in the world? So, I don't know. And you proceed to tell them your country is the greatest country in the world. When I worked for an aircraft company years ago, we used to sing a song about Douglas aircraft. We worked for Douglas and we're proud of it. We had the Douglas bowling team. There was a Lockheed bowling team. You know what I mean? Whereas you're interested in science, you don't wave a flag. When I go to auto races, I'm interested in any car that comes in. Do you know what I mean? When I go to air races, if it's Japanese planes or German planes, I'm interested in the technology. Not, God damn it, I hope an American comes in, some sort of idiot thinks that way. All right, if you can understand what I'm talking about, it means that we're interested in technology as a service. To serve, here's what technology means to me. Technology is extensional devices. Now, there was a gadget we used to have as kids. I don't know if it still exists. Richard, you ever run into one of these? They had a handle on this end, a handle on that end, and two prongs at the other end. You can grab something far away, you squeeze it, and it goes forward. Did you ever see that gadget, John? That was called, in the early days, you never saw it?
Yeah. Sure.
Extensional device. You can extend. The telephone is that. You can call a friend 20 miles away, find out if he's home. The telephone is an extension of human systems. Therefore, if anyone says we have too much technology, give them the old Victrola where they have to wind it up, and the needle's skipping over, scratching the records. There's no such thing as too much technology. There is such a thing as negative aspects of technology where we don't plan to harness the waste or utilize it. We dump it into the rivers. That's not technology. That's stupidity. So if people start turning against technology, you have a disaster ahead. What people have to learn to do is learn how to understand what it is that forces technology in such a preponderously stupid direction, such as lousing up the environment. So what we need is a society managed by, I want to say it carefully, the methods of science, not scientists. Because scientists are just as stupid as anybody else in any field. The methods of science. In other words, if you take the United States and you do things like this, you don't consult the public at all. I'll tell you why in a little while. You plan a system of irrigation canals across the country, across this pattern, national transportation systems, major cities at particular points, towers every 40 miles, and as time goes on, we change the distance. So, as I pointed out many times, if there's a lot of snow in Canada and the northern part of the United States, and a sudden thaw, there's going to be thousands homeless due to floods. Do you understand that? So if you have the towers built, and you know the temperature changes, we have big flood control devices all the way across the United States, and the temperature change closes all the flood locks. Do you understand? So instead of having thousands homeless due to floods, you harness the flood waters. Is that clear? But here, every goddamn year or two, thousands homeless due to flood, just as though it was something that happened. There's no accidents, there's technical negligence. So we're saying that we can design and engineer a continent so that there's no crowding, no sweat. All these canals will irrigate the United States, maintain a good water table control across the country. Then we'll have an electronic grid across the country for power transmission until another system comes. Even using low temperature methods for low losses, transmitting through the power grid across the country. At the same time, we must invite Canada and the islands into this complex, and eventually all of the world into a technological complex. So, you have to ask questions. How many people do you want in the United States? What kind of population density should we go for? Then you arrange your fares. So you don't bring up girls that want to have 9 kids, and the guy says, I want a kid, my own 9 kids. You don't bring them up with those values. After all, a female, an effeminate female, or an aggressive male, or a butch male is one condition to those values. So you raise your children in a complex by people that like kids, and they work with them, teach them things, and they all are brothers, they're brought up as brothers. You may not get along with your brother or your parents. Your parents may be aliens to you. I don't know. See? So you keep talking about aliens. What the hell's an alien? See? What's this guy, Carl Sagan? Very much interested in interstellar communications. We want to communicate with other worlds. We can't communicate with the Russians. We can't communicate with the British or the French too well. We can't communicate, the Democrats can't communicate with the Republicans. What the hell is Carl Sagan going to do? Let me tell you what Sagan ought to be doing. He ought to study the methods right now of how to bridge the difference between the Russians and the Americans. That will demonstrate the feasibility of the technology of communication. Do you understand what I'm saying? Don't go telling me you want to communicate with the Martians. You communicate with the Earth people first. Establish bridges. Demonstrate the principles. That's what Carl Sagan ought to be talking about. Carl Sagan ought to be talking about how to prevent our general trends toward nuclear annihilation. Every scientist, every school teacher in science ought to be working on all the kids on an international project that would raise the technology of the world and the standard of living and the intelligence and the IQ, whatever you want to call it, of everybody on Earth. The smarter people are, the richer you are. the more slums that exist, impoverished people, stupidity, the more dangerous your life. You can be a nuclear biologist and killed by some impoverished Puerto Rican. You understand what I mean? Or Negro, or Jew, or Swede. So we're saying, let's learn to manage the Earth as a system. And then not go out into space until we can engage in a joint venture. The French, the Russians, the Chinese, joint ventures only. And that outer space is not to be used as a weapon system, as an international agreement. Otherwise, these assholes that are going out into space right now, they got hundreds of flying monitor devices that are photographing all kinds of things on Earth. You understand? They are too sick to go out into space. This is what I maintain at this point. So, socio-cyberneering maintains that we would like to see the methods of science applied to government.
What I was thinking earlier was that, you were saying that obviously the government is motivated by profit. If there's a bucket, it will do it, to help the people. Is that what you were trying to get at before?
No, not the government. It's the control group.
Yeah. Well, let's say the government is really the people that go to those groups, okay? Yeah. The Apollo program was in the middle of the Vietnamese War, and when we were dumping money in the Vietnamese War, we also dumped $25 billion in the Apollo program from 63 to 68.
Yes.
And now we found a $58 billion return from that investment.
Yes, spin-offs.
Spin-offs. Don't you think that the same type of spin-offs could be gained from this type of program? At the same time, gaining public awareness to that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Let me show you the dangers of it, though. Right now, all those things you're saying are true. But there's also a mass movement toward super weapon systems. See, so if you just concentrate on that area, see, so that we can exist, I'm afraid in the next 5 or 6 years, we almost had it at the Bay of Pigs. I don't know where you were then, but we almost had it with the Russians. We came close many times to social annihilation. And that's what my prime interest right now is exposing the stupidity of war and the possible benefits of international cooperation. That is a tremendous thing. If we can get to that point, if we work like, I'm not interested in a cure for cancer now. If they find a cure for cancer tomorrow, and the nations keep moving in the direction they're moving, it won't amount to anything. All the art, everything will be burnt up, all the books.
But who are you trying to convince the stupidity of war? Are you going to the heads of
no, you don't work to them.
Saying it's stupid? They're going to say, bullshit. They can make
you
money
don't talk
off
to them.
They make money off this at making, F-15 fighters and MX missiles. They make money off this. So those people you have to talk to, tell them the people of the United States.
I'm talking to you about it. And if you agree, and later on you agree, say, to join us, if you want to do that, then we hope to make films about what we want to do. And we hope to build an organization in a city and live in it, and then start a second city and a third city. Do you understand? And invite people in. We think we might be able to affect the way people think about things through films. Because when I speak, they say, well, look at the guy with the cat that's having a beard. They may not like it. Well, look at that guy. He's just a kid. What do you know? I'm older than you. When you make a film, in the film, there's nobody trying to sell them anything with any accent or regional dialect. It's a film about the Earth, about how we live, about the forces that hurt humans. You make a film along those lines, and you can get different kinds of support. Do you understand? And with that kind of support, you move in that kind of direction. Now, we think if the free enterprise undergoes modification, free enterprise system, I don't mean shooting the owners of the system. If it undergoes modification within the system, then we think that the wealthiest people today would not live as well as the average person 50 years from now, or 25 years from now. That the kings of old did not live as well as the middle-class American today. Do you understand what I mean? They didn't have the. So there are methods. Well, I don't mean a life where everybody is reduced to living in square hovels, with a button that you press and say, you will appear at Central Unit 25D. This is science fiction shit. I'm talking about a world in which the state doesn't bother you. The state's job in the future is loosen your belt. There's new equipment available for everybody. There's a new lathe out that's small and milling machine. You're welcome to take one or two, whatever you need. There's new hi-fi equipment, and they shove it into your unit at home. The state that I'm talking about provides you with the most sophisticated technology every year. Not tighten your belt, loosen your belt. Explore. Undersea photography. In other words, the more books you own, the richer we are. No books are sold in a sane society. We make them available. In fact, if a kid takes out 3 or 4 books, we automatically increases lighting and bookshelves in the building. If he fools with chemistry, we extend the facilities. Do you understand? So we try to encourage children to explore the hell out of things. There's no area that's restricted except experiments on human beings or animals for a particular reason. What we will do in the future is when a human gets run over by a Mack truck, we remove the heart or those organs that are all right, keep it alive, cut out liver tissue, put it in petri dishes or glass flow lines, and keep it alive and control the liver cell multiplication. We work not with an animal. You don't need a dog. What you need is a circulatory system. What you need, you don't need to grow apples on trees. What you need is apple cell culture tubes. Long glass tubes where we culture the cells of apples. You can do this today. You can take an apple tree, cut it, and graft a pear on it, and grow a pear on an apple tree. Now all you need basically is the circulatory system of the apple tree. So what the chemists of the future will be doing is growing continuous potato cells, you know what I mean? In glass tubes, extruding it out instead of farmers spraying the ground and cutting the weeds and worrying about the grasshoppers. Look at this shit. The entomologists, some of us, tell people that the healthiest thing in the world is insects, the most nutritious substance. And when the grasshoppers come, the locust plagues, everybody's in panic. All you do is catch the locust. You get the locust plus the food they ate. You got twice as much food. We don't process locusts. If you don't like locusts, can the goddamn thing and feed them to pigs. And all the grass we cut in Florida will feed all the cattle of the world for 1 year. And we cut in 1 month in the state of Florida. We just don't use it. And these assholes tell you live in scarcity. You don't live in scarcity. The management of the system is so terrible that whenever I appear on the air, they think I'm some kind of nut. Because the statements about all the disciplines are so different. They think, well, Christ, if he's not rich, he must be some kind of nut. You understand? Okay, so the idea is not to wait for public approval. See, the trouble with us is we get up, we get a new idea, we express it, and the majority of people don't like it. So we think it must be something wrong, you must be fucked up. Look, when Galileo spoke and he said the earth was round, like I said, he could have said it's a little flat and a little round, got along with 4 people. The idea is not to get along with people. That's a false concept. If you find out through research that drinking cranberry juice reduces migraine, get up and announce it, whether they like it or not. There are little things called germs. They can't be seen. And they seem to affect the human body in this way and that way. You say, well, that's preposterous. That's their problem, not yours. Whenever you discover anything, don't worry about what the community of scientists will think about it. Don't worry about whether your average doctor agrees with you. Do your work, collect your data, get up and read it. And if they don't agree with you, they say, well, that's preposterous. Just say, what's wrong with it? Dissect it, break it down. But never accept the authority of a person who says, I'm older than you. You know what I mean? And this is what has to be done in science classes in school. You have to take away this worship of people in high positions. You must meet them and discuss things with them on any level at all, and there's no such thing as a foolish question. Any question raised is an interesting question. And all subjects must be discussed in school, and no grades given. If you're faster than another student, meaning in learning certain things, the person says, well, I don't understand basic chemistry, then you take time out and you try to show them how it works. But you may be a damn good student and a lousy instructor. You know, there are many terrific physicists, but they can't get to their class. And there are many guys who are not too good at physics, but they're damn good at instruction. Do you know what I mean? So we have to have the kids that are upperclassmen work with the kids that are not too good at it. Now sometimes a kid that's brilliant in mathematics and chemistry can't make things mechanically. He can't do glass blowing, can't shape things, can't operate a lathe neatly. There's another kid that isn't good at that can do that. So you get together and he shows you how to work a lathe and you show him how to do the other thing. In other words, the more we help each other, the faster the nation grows. Not for commercial reasons.
Well, see, before you mentioned the word the system, and I guess the system is how things work. What we live in right now.
Yeah.
And the way I see it is composed of 2 things. Those are people that make the money and the people that make the money for them.
Well, there's no money in our system. I don't know what you do with that.
Well, I'm saying in our system as we have right now.
Yeah, right now you have that set up.
I can see the way you have things, designed that it'll work But
here's your question, how do you go from here to there?
Right.
Isn't that your question?
Well, let me get to that in a minute, but you say this will work. I agree with you. Well, you should have, sooner or later it's going to have to come around like Galileo. The people that accepted his time, a couple hundred years later, oh yeah, the world is round. Well, it was too late for him. He lost.
Too late for them too. They lost.
But I'd like to see I'd like to see these cities that you have designed.
So here's how they come about.
I'd like to live in one of them. But the way things are going now, I'm not going to have any chance.
Okay. Your only chance is if you're interested in this organization at a later date. Okay. In the meantime, here's how it comes about. And people don't seem to remember this. I talk about it all the time, and they always forget it. And they say, well, how do you move from here to there? I'm going to answer it again. How you move from here to there. You don't have to do anything, really. It works like this. We go back to the same organization like General Motors. They were moving about a year ago toward 95% automation. You know what that means, okay? They're moving people off the production line. So if you move people out of these plants, as you know, computers are shrinking, getting smarter, better memory, etc. And machines, you can slip a tape in, they'll turn out a certain type of car body, pull out with another tape, and the machines will turn out another kind of car body. Once you start doing that with central cybernated centers that control all the production plants in the country, central cybernation, they are moving toward that diversification of industry. General Motors now has shares in the aircraft industry and DuPont, and they're diversified. Now what happens is they're moving toward automation, and about 25 years ago they were displacing 45,000 people a week. Today it's much higher. So the machines are displacing people. Sooner or later, and I mean sooner, within the next few years, these people won't have the purchasing power to buy cars. When you automate fully, they don't have the money. That's the end of the system. So each system has an end. The dinosaurs come to an end. The kings, the landowners, the religions break down and change. This system cannot remain fixed. The free enterprise system was terrific 60 years ago. It's no longer valid. So the system is self-defeating through the process of automation. Now watch what happens. When you get mass unemployment, the system, the automobile companies, either going to have to feed these people, because they're the only ones making money by some people who are still working, see? They're going to have to feed them, send them to school, house them, clothe them, or kill them. Either way. Now, what are you going to do? Manufacture automobiles and give these people the money to buy the cars you manufacture? The system will never do that. So why should General Motors manufacture cars and give them the money to buy the cars? Don't you see what I mean? It becomes an insane move. Your system is approaching this point where technological employment was going up. Now they say, well, you got new industries and it employs new people. In the early days, a plant this size would turn out so much goods. Today, a plant the same size, the curve is moving up like that. Turns out much more in a smaller plant with fewer people. And they say, well, look at General Motors today. It employs 70,000 people, whereas in the old days it only employed 10,000. But those 70,000 people turned out more than 800,000 people. Do you understand what I mean? And they can turn out, I'll give you an idea. The United States, before we went to war with Germany, had 500 first-class fighting aircraft. The Nazis were turning out 2,500 a month, first class. Lindbergh went to Germany and he said, if we got into war with Germany now, we would lose. Now somebody got mad at Lindbergh and said he was pro-German. What he said is they're turning out 2,500 planes a month. If the United States can hold off for 4 years or so and get that sleeping giant moving, we can turn out 90,000 planes a year continuously because we're too far for an air raid, practical air raid. So they held off and we were turning out 90,000 planes a year after the first few years. Now the United States can turn out anything it wants to. They can turn out prefabricated houses, but they don't. So when I say, which I have said at sessions, we can change the face of the earth in 10 years. If you get rid of bricklayers, carpenters, whenever you build a house, you got a guy sawing wood, staplers, what you do is you build steel structures like this, and you lay them down on the ground, extending about half a mile. You tie a cable to it, and you pull up all these structures at once. You understand what I mean? And you go in for national city systems, whereby the total city is built as a system. Sewage, recycling of garbage, air conditioning, everything is a total system. But you don't let everybody drive whatever kind of car they can afford. If I've got an old car and I can't afford a brake job, I can kill you and your kids. Do you understand that? So if he drives a Rolls Royce, if you consider that a good car, and I'm just a black man who can't afford a brake job, you're dead. So the idea is human beings want the use of everything as long as they live, right? So you have a city built where you use the art centers, the movie centers, you shoot pictures. You go to Yellowstone National Park, you don't own a fucking camera. There's a big building in the park, and it has all kinds of film equipment and cameras, and you take it out. Shoot whatever the hell you want to shoot and stick it back. And the maintenance crew keeps it in key shape. You go home with the goddamn film. You understand? If you want to. You got a tape recorder, he's got a tape recorder, I've got a tape recorder, he's got a radio, TV set. What you have is a central system. And the central system will play any movie you want on your TV set. They talk about conservation of energy, they're liars. We can conserve a lot of energy if you use this system I'm talking about. It's simple. I also told you, I don't know if you were at the session, if you stagger the calendar so 1/7 of the people are off every day of the week, your beaches are never jammed. That doesn't cost money. But they tell you that you got to save energy, whereas you know the president, what was it, 300 gallons an hour on that helicopter he flew around in, telling you to tighten your belt. What are you tightening your belt to? So the idea is design furniture don't break down, equipment that doesn't break down, and you don't waste resources. Right?
Mm-hmm. Okay, with the system you talk about within the next couple of years...
One more thing before you ask, do you understand how the change comes?
Definitely.
The majority of people are unemployed, the government calls upon science and technology, and what the hell do we do now? They can't operate, then they call upon science and technology. They will not call, I don't care how many radio speeches you get, social change comes at the appropriate time in our history.
Well, see, that's been the corners, you follow history through. The only time you ever get change is when it's needed.
Yes. We call it the march of events.
We face extinction, what can we do to stop it?
Yeah.
But, okay, when you talk about this right here, in the future when nobody's got jobs, one way is to go towards technology. The other way could be the government could blame it on the Russians who start a big war.
They might.
Okay.
They try to do it. Or the Jews.
They do it all the time.
Yeah.
Okay. What's to say that in 6 years, we're not going to have a Cold War, and if this does happen, we're not going to say, well, we'll have to start a war. That way we'll put these people back into work making planes.
And you can't have a war anymore. There are other problems. We have tremendous... The fuel shortage that they talk about is contrived. But a big portion of it can be ruined very quickly with new war technology. If you talk about scarcity, the kind of scarcity you're going to have, you have another war, you might as well forget the future for a long time. I would say it would drag people back. What we have to do right now is organize people that are ready for it. I don't know how many people are ready for this point of view. Maybe you have to come to 10 sessions. Maybe you say, well, all that's in the future. I'm going to live for myself now. It depends on your point of view. If you keep that point of view, the future will be whatever the hell it'll be. If we can manage to get to the first phase, if we can, then the future may be somewhat different. If your school teachers, if you would get up in the classroom and point out these issues, just bring them up. And at your science fair, show that you can't operate a society in the United States alone. Because there's an area in Siberia called the Weather Center, where the world's weather is born. It starts there. If the Russians wanted to generate a nuclear dust project there, spread it around, they can spread that all over the world. You cannot, since the Icelandic current, the Japanese stream moves all over, they can design all kinds of underwater migratory nuclear equipment. So the idea is the world is too small now to have separate nations. We've got to move toward not the UN, but a system of using the methods of science in social affairs. Now, when a person gets up and says, well, would I as an individual be able to participate? I always say immediately. I says, in fact, I've got a job for you now. We got a whole plague of red ants eating our corn and biting the farmers. What do you suggest? You're now in charge.
Well, I don't know.
I said, well, we got other problems. And name them.
Well, I don't know.
I said, what do you want to do then? How do you want to help? You want to go back to school and study something? Pin them down. These little assholes that get up and say, I believe in democracy, shake their hands, and give them a position of leadership immediately. And we got some problems. The engine falls off an airplane. Any suggestions?
Well, no.
Can we make our fish longer, thinner, shorter? You know, when I was a kid, I told some of you people, listen, you didn't believe me. They used to grow square pigs. They put them in an aluminum jacket, see, and they squared them, so you get 3 times as many pigs in a freight train. They've gone back to that now with watermelons.
Yeah, watermelon, yeah.
Yeah. Now, everybody gets, well, that's ridiculous. How can you grow a square pig? You don't believe it?
The Nazis did it with people.
Well, I know an artist that's shaping bananas and grapefruit like people, and you can make a little face on it. But you can make a mask on your oranges and put Anita Bryan right on the orange if you wanted it. See? Or Abraham Lincoln. You can grow the food right into a pumpkin with a smile and two eyes. They haven't done that yet. You see, there's a lot of money you can make in this system if you want to do that. But the system isn't going to last long enough. You'll be wiped out, live in a sea of filth. I think it's more important to talk of social issues. Somebody says to me, well, why don't you work on cancer or heart disease? I don't give a shit if you've got a good heart and a stupid mind. See, if Hitler came up and you had a terrible heart, and you fix it up, you've just committed a crime. So the point is to stay with social ideas. Get that cleaned up, and we think most mental disorders are caused by stress, system stress. Most kids that are hyperactive, that have other problems, are caused by artificial coloring in food. Once you clean up all that shit, once you take away competition, which they tell you is natural and good, which is bad for humans, once you take that away, you don't have all the things you've had. You don't have high blood pressure. You don't have hypertension. You don't have nations saying, we can do better than you. Now, what do you want? Do you want to live in a sane world?
Okay.
Do you want to fight? Yes.
Two more questions before
It's
I
all
let
right.
somebody else take over. Do you think that the idea of the power satellites is a good idea?
Yes.
Okay.
But the geothermal people tell us there's 20 million years of power right under the surface of the Earth. Tapping geothermal
Are you
energy.
kind of tired of taking the Earth apart for power?
No, you don't need to take anything apart. But anyway, there's other systems, tapping the Van Allen belt. There's a lot of energy up there. We're just not organized to do that. And all this crap about men out there in spacesuits putting out these superstructures a mile long, we can design structures that expand when they get out there. Systems of geodesic structures that open up if you want them out in space. You don't need a guy screwing anything together, which is fantastic. You don't need that.
Okay.
The point is, we can do it. Man can do almost anything if he gets away from metaphysics, if he stops praying to God for peace on earth, if he makes contact with the Russians, invites them into a joint venture, if he says that if only the neighbors wouldn't be so mean, if he can go to the neighbors and establish a good relationship. All I'm saying is translate all the bullshit of religion into into an action pattern. That's all. It's much easier.
Okay. And the second thing I was going to ask is, okay, we're now 150 years in the future, and the world is now a big brotherhood, and we're living in the cities that you've designed, and they work. Space colonies then?
Okay.
You're not going to be satisfied when you get something over there.
That's a fair question.
Just send him out
Okay.
there to make this.
Here's the story. Possibly in the next 6, 7 years, maybe certainly within 10 years, you will see these androids I was talking about that are smarter than people, much smarter in all areas. That will be your new government, okay? But androids, when I talk of androids or cyborgs, they don't even look like people, okay? There'll be a system that can handle anything. Now, man is on the way out. Man as a system is too slow. These systems can make decisions in 1/2 billionth of a second. No human can. No human can see the scanning lines on TV, whereas electronic devices can show you that spot moving up and back. It can slow up time, speed. You know what I mean? If you took the collective intelligence of systems and put them in a computer, the trouble with computers and the trouble with books and the trouble with linguistic communication is it takes time for me to speak to you, whereas they've done a terrible thing to computers. They arrested them. They put the brakes on. So computers say, how are you? A computer can, in a few seconds, line up the country and show you how to use it. But it's slowed up to talk to men. And the minute the computers break free from human systems, they always talk of an interface between computers and man. They want a liaison man to go between the computer and people. He's a drag. Once the computers are connected to the nation, this is what we want to do. We want to connect Central Cybernation right out to the farm belt directly. I use a wire, but it needn't be a wire. We transmit the power, and here's your farm area. And I mentioned before, here's your plants growing. If the water table drops below a certain level, it's picked up.
Yeah.
and the flood locks open and bring water in. If nutrients change, you don't pick up a phone, Sam, with the Department of Agriculture, fill out Form D4. All the fucking paperwork is worthless. Do you understand? This computer is connected to the agricultural belt, but all systems are redundant. Maybe you'd have 10 units in each system. All society systems are interconnected. In case of failure in one system, the other takes over. You don't need to call the Red Cross. You don't need any of that kind of thing. Every ship at sea is monitored on a global system continually, just like the Navy. So you don't have to look for a missing ship. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Okay. The system that I'm talking about should be comprehensible to you. What I said about the agricultural belt is also true about people. Somebody said to me, well, how are you going to elect people into office? You don't. In other words, if you made 50 contributions in agriculture and you made 3, you will project lead that area until he comes along. But you don't have a permanent position. You have the position for 8 months, and if someone comes along, you step down, but you get the same income. Your income may be $300,000 a year, which you spend every year, no banks. If you don't spend it, it's dated and obsolete.
Why even have money at all?
Money means access to what's manufactured.
Why just have it there for you if you need it?
Yes, it is. But you see, in the beginning, we will turn out so many micro recordings, see, miniature, nuclear, atomic recordings, which one record will play 1 year, every goddamn piece of music on Earth, in a small, tiny unit with molecular recording. You see, once you have a unit like that, we let you know that it's now available. And so you got to remove all your lousy tapes, you got books all over the place, you move them out. You put in a small unit, you got the world's information in a cigar box, you understand? So what the state will do is let you know what's available. And the state bothers you all the time telling you what's available. You want to go here, take a 3-month cruise, there's a new ship built. They will do that on your video set all the time, telling you where you can go, what you can do, if you'd like to do that. You don't have any newspapers, because I think about 34 years ago, we stuck a sensitive paper in front of a TV set, phosphorescent paper in the early days, and ran some printed readout. And we took it off. We thought, well, in those days, we were able to make newspaper deliveries immediately. And then you take your phosphorescent paper and erase it with infrared, and take the news of the day again. And if you want it to hold, you press hold, and the paper holds it like a blueprint, like a photograph, like a Polaroid film. See? You can hold the image. So you don't waste cutting down all your goddamn forests for newspapers, which contain bullshit all the time. And so here you got your TV set, not this kind of shit. The TV set that will collect that data for you. Your TV set will give you 3-dimensional pictures, it'll give you blueprints, communications. It's an amplifier, it'll give you hi-fi music, sound. You don't have an amplifier in, an amplifier there, and an amplifier with your record system. Do you understand? It's a unit. So you talk about energy, conservation of energy, that's the way to do it.
Yeah.
Now, all I'm saying to you is that we live in an old kind of world in which humans have been running the show far beyond the time they ought to. You know, we can run trains and all kinds of things without people. But we could run it safely if we decide to do so. Now, the other question you'll run into is where's the money coming from to do all these things? As long as the resources are here, you don't need money. I don't want to repeat myself. If you took all the money, all the gold, dumped it off the sea, coast of Japan, sank it, bottom of the sea, as long as you don't touch the factories, titanium, chromium, manganese, as long as you have that, you can do anything you want to do. And we have lots of resources. Still, all the old cars on the highway will be taken off and reprocessed into new cars.
We haven't lost it.
Why is that so difficult to understand?
Okay. Well,
Oh, excuse me. The question that other people might, will the church be permitted to operate? We say yes. And well, here's the problem. The church will be built, beautiful buildings, see. But during the week they're used for other purposes.
Oh,
Now wait. And the priest is going to have nothing to say. He can't say help the poor, there are no poors, no slums. He can't take up a collection because he's got a guaranteed income. And everybody's eating. Now he's going to say, do unto others, you have others doing it, you got that going. So, Father, have you got anything to say? See what I mean? So the priest gets phased out by his own bullshit. In other words, all you do is translate the society into what they talk about. Is that okay? There's no marriage, there's no funerals. What?
about life after death.
I'm thinking about life during life. You know.
Well, that's the one thing you're not going to be able to phase out.
I think we
That's
can.
the main reason people go to church.
I think we can phase out death. Perhaps not in my time, perhaps. I don't know how much time I've got. But anyway, it's highly probable that you may see the end of death in your time. Because it's relatively easy to phase out death. All you have to do is identify the aging process and redesign a system that can cause you see, the cells you're made up of reproduce themselves over and over again, so many times. And what happens is the system gets larger. What happens is a lot of minerals and fats accumulate in the blood vessels, and the tubes become clogged. The nutrients can't get out to feed the cells, they shrivel and die. Someday we will flush out the blood vessels, and that's not too far off. I can see that accomplished in 5 years. Flush out the blood vessels, regenerate the cells, regenerate kidney tissue, regenerate brain tissue, build artificial eyes, see what I mean? And hearing aids built in, artificial construction. I can see living human systems, human types, living on indefinitely. And I see the end of birth, the process of birth.
We're talking about that right there, we changed the subject a little bit. That'd be great if you have the body that's living for thousands of years, but what about the brain? You can't stop the brain cells from dying. Why not?
The brain cells do not multiply. And brain cells, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but you can take wires and extrude them very fine, coat them with carbon, and then generate gaps in the wires by electronic means. And these gaps, artificial nerves, in other words, built of extruded carbon fibers, can carry information, and we can build artificial gelatinous substances that work just like the brain, only more effective. What will happen in the future is if you get hit by a piece of shrapnel or something falling and a certain area, speech centers are damaged, they will make a gelatinous-like substance, put it in the brain, and reorganize it rather than educate you. They will pre-program it and put in all that information without going to school. In other words, you can take a clean system, print it, and the person comes out and says, well, I've lived in Paris for years, never been anywhere. Now, and describe everything if you pump it in. What do you think a child is? A child doesn't know anything. When you take a 6-year-old child and he says, that's an elephant, he said, oh my, what an intelligent little boy. The little boy was standing at the zoo and he says, what's that? You said an elephant. He said, that's an elephant. He doesn't know what the hell an elephant is. Nobody knows anything. We all make noises. I don't know anything. We are mechanisms of a certain kind, a very limited type of device. Someday, the human potential is tremendous when modified. And we believe that humans will be modified. They have to be modified if we're to go on and live in a technological age. If we're to get to that age that you think of, space colonization, whatever you call it, I see the future going off into other directions, but not in a spaceship. I see projected human intelligence crossing through space and time in a new way, not a ship with men in it. You can project your intelligence anywhere on Earth. You can almost do it today. If you wanted to rig up a 3D TV set, I can take you through the Douglas aircraft plant in 3D. You can be standing there and look at the new aircraft going together, you know, in color, and you see dust and scrap aluminum on the floor, which isn't there. And if you kicked it in a ring, if you wanted it to, we could do that. Now what the hell do you want to go there for? See what? As long as you don't know the difference. I see the projection of human intelligence as cheaper than loading some space vehicle for 10,000 idiots in that space vehicle with their goddamn sandwich shops and trees growing all around and crazy rivers running through that goddamn thing and birds flying off. This is a concept of an asshole. I mean, that has nothing to do with science and technology. That's a sort of a mad dream. I don't know if you remember Jules Verne's spaceship with chickens in it and flying all over the place. That's where you're at now. Okay? Jules Verne. Now, if you want to go out into space and look at the Earth, what they say is very beautiful. Some reverend recently wrote an article about how beautiful the Earth is from outer space. He says it's one of the most beautiful planets, because you know beauty is relative. And he says it's beautiful. But he says, let's look upon its surface, what we've done with it. War, stupidity, poverty, hunger, the United States controlling the world resources. And this reverend wrote this article in Science Digest, which is very useful. And the point is that it isn't necessary to have this misery. You understand all cemeteries will be unearthed that we find embalming fluid in our drinking water. We're going to get rid of all that shit. There's going to be no more funerals, no more marriages, no more families.
Waste of land.
What? Well, but the idea is that you represent the future. But if you're not shoved in other directions by occasional people, either be lobes or guys like me or books, or other things you read or people you hear, or other lectures you attend, you undergo modification. And all the kids in your classroom will tend to push you back to where you were, because they don't like anyone that comes off in a different direction. So you have millions of appointed guardians all through the system of the old system, not only the police and the FBI, but normal people. You're living together, you're not married, what do you do with the children? They all ask the same question. Same question. They never say anything new. When I walk into a barber shop and sit on a chair, the guy comes over and he starts cutting my hair. So what makes you think I want a haircut? They make assumptions all the time. So what you got to remember about the future is that the future challenges, asks questions about everything, and is constant discussion and innovation. That classrooms are free. You sit around any way you want to. You lie on the floor. You're not in order. There are no desks in a row. And the school's open 24 hours. You walk in and walk out when you're not interested. And in all kinds of classrooms you walk into and lean, you get no credits. You just learn and you do things and you experiment. But when you want to operate some kind of special apparatus, you are shown how to do it. By the apparatus. When you walk over and you touch a portion of the apparatus, this controls the volume. You touch this controls the duration. This is for people who can't handle systems beyond the complexity of 200. See? And so the system tells you. When you want to learn a foreign language, when you touch this in a school, it says la crayon, whatever the hell it is. The minute you touch it, it gives you the word for it. And you don't have to study foreign languages anymore. You speak to a person in French, to a translator, and immediately speaks in English, Scottish, or German.
Like one language.
Yes, they will. Be mathematics, where all human systems are translated to numerical systems. Language is sloppy, terrible, inadequate, dangerous. Now, so this system, socio-cyberneering, doesn't only attack the church. It attacks all manner of social operation. That's why it's the least apt to succeed. Okay? Galileo had a chance. We have very little chance. There's very few people at present ready for this type of information. We think if we had a national radio program or TV show once, I think we'd get about 7,000 responses out of the many millions of listeners. And that's good. As long as we can build a core, a nucleus, if you can identify with a direction, take your time, listen to these ideas, take them apart, do your own thing, or join us at a later date and work with us. Because we don't want to hurt anybody or kill anybody. I think the system, once most people understand it, they will tend to join the system. It's only picturing some sort of people in gray telling you what to do. That's 1984, Brave New World, the way they made science in the future as people without feeling, cold science. I think the art and literary world is cold. I think the literary world, the religious world says there. The scientist works on diabetes, heart conditions, you know what I mean? He's eradicated the plague, just about eradicated bubonic plague, and never says there. You know what I mean? So the artist, to me, and the literary person is cold, whereas science is warm, direct and open and honest. Let's go for coffee. Let's go for coffee. Let's go for coffee. Let's go for coffee. Let's go for coffee.